Have you ever said to yourself, I'll rest when this is done? I'll light the candle after I catch up. Or I'll do something that feels good once I've earned it. Yeah, same. But here's the thing, pleasure isn't a reward, it's a right. And today, we're talking about why saving pleasure for later is one of the sneakiest, most normalized ways we deny ourselves what we actually need. Hey, love. I'm Dr. Misty, AASECT Certified Sex Therapist and founder of Untamed Ember, where we explore radical self discovery, pleasure reclamation, and the glorious unlearning of shame, guilt, and all the cultural nonsense that's kept you from feeling good in your body. And today, we're unpacking why you deserve pleasure. Right now. Not later, not when the checklist is done, not when you've earned it, but in this exact, imperfect, slightly chaotic moment of your beautiful life. So if you've been caught in the maybe later loop, this video is your gentle, slightly sassy intervention. Let's talk about it. Let's start with this, the belief that pleasure has to be earned. Yeah, that didn't come out of nowhere. It's not your fault you feel like you need to check all the boxes before you're allowed to enjoy yourself. That belief has roots in purity culture, capitalism, trauma responses, and a whole lot of systems designed to make us feel like we're only valuable when we're producing. If you've ever felt guilty for resting, if you've ever pushed your needs aside to be good, useful, or low maintenance, if you've ever swallowed your desire because you didn't feel safe, convenient, or socially acceptable, you're not broken, you're conditioned. This myth shows up in a million little ways. I'll take care of myself after I finish work. I'll have sex when I've lost the weight. I'll explore what I really want when the kids are older. Or once I'm less anxious. Or once I figure out how to deserve it. We delay pleasure like it's some kind of treat at the end of a productivity race. Like we have to suffer first to be worthy of joy. But here's the thing. You're not a machine. You are a living, feeling, pleasure-capable creature. And when you withhold pleasure from yourself, when you make it conditional, you're reinforcing a message you probably didn't even choose, that your joy is inconvenient, unimportant, or dependent on your usefulness to others. This conditioning runs deep, especially if you're neurodivergent and taught to suppress your needs, a survivor of trauma who learned that pleasure wasn't safe, queer, kinky, or raised in a culture where your desire was erased, shamed, or pathologized, a high-functioning human who feels like resting or receiving makes you lazy or selfish. If one of those are you, or all of them, first of all, hi, I see you. Second, that myth doesn't belong to you anymore. We're not here to earn pleasure. We're here to reclaim it. And to do that, we've got to start with your body, your beautiful, capable, wired for pleasure body. And listen, I know this isn't just theory. I live this too. Even as a therapist, especially as a therapist, someone who literally teaches about nervous system regulation, rest, embodied self-care, there are days where I look up from my calendar and realize I have moved from session to session to session without ever stepping away from my desk. I have the intention to pause, to take a stretch break, to light a candle, to lie on the floor and actually let my body have a moment. I know it's helpful. I know it works. I instruct my clients to do that. And still, I sometimes skip it. Why? Because part of me still thinks, just push through, be efficient, power through now, rest later. But here's what usually happens. I make it to the end of the day, technically having done it all, but I'm brain dead, disconnected, too depleted to enjoy the evening, too tired to connect with my body, my partner, or my own pleasure. And I hate that moment where I realize I had space to give myself joy. I just didn't take it. Not because I was lazy, but because I was still running that old story that pleasure was optional, that I had to wait until I was done being useful or had time. But I'm not here for that anymore. I'm done acting like rest or joy or sensation has to be earned. Now, I'm practicing building it in, before the inbox, between the sessions, even when it feels indulgent, because that's the shift, that's the healing. Let's talk science for a second. Because pleasure, it's not just a nice idea, it's a neurological need. Your nervous system is wired to seek pleasure. Your brain is designed to respond to things that feel good. And when you give it those moments, no matter how small, it rewards you with a whole cocktail of feel-good chemicals. We're talking dopamine, your anticipation and reward neurotransmitter. It's what makes you feel something and feel satisfaction when you get it. Oxytocin, the connection hormone, released through touch, connection, and trust. Serotonin helps regulate mood, stabilize emotions, and promote overall well-being. And endorphins, your body's natural pain relievers and mood boosters. All of that from pleasure. And here's what's even better. Your brain doesn't care whether that pleasure is coming from a full-body orgasm or the smell of your favorite candle. If it makes you feel good, if it brings you back into your body, your breath, your aliveness, your brain will thank you for it. It lights up the same whether it's a hot makeout session or a perfectly buttered piece of toast. Seriously, don't underestimate toast, especially with butter. And when you deny yourself those moments, when you keep putting pleasure off, you're not just delaying joy, you're depriving your nervous system of regulation, of safety, of the signals that say, I'm okay, I'm safe, I'm allowed to feel good here. This is why so many of us feel disconnected, touch-starved, emotionally numb at the end of our day. We're not broken, we're under-pleasured. Because we've been taught that pleasure is extra, when really it's foundational. It's not just about self-care. It's about repatterning your entire relationship with your body, your needs, and your worth. You don't need to earn your right to feel good. You were born with it. Your body knows that. Your brain knows that. Now it's time to let you know that too. So let's talk about what happens when we keep putting pleasure off, because we all do it, especially those of us who are high-functioning, high-achieving, or conditioned to overgive. When you're constantly moving, performing, producing, without weaving in moments of joy, softness, connection, your body starts to lose touch with what pleasure even feels like. You get used to being disconnected, used to that numbness, used to that just get through the day energy. And when you do finally give yourself something nourishing, it might feel uncomfortable, too much, like you have to shrink back or pull away. That's what I call the pleasure ceiling. It's about that invisible limit your nervous system has for how much goodness it thinks you're allowed to feel. You suddenly hit that ceiling, and suddenly you start sabotaging the experience, distracting yourself, rushing through it, talking yourself out of it, numb out before the sensation gets too intense. And that doesn't mean you're broken. It means your system is trying to protect you, even from joy. I've hit that ceiling myself, which is what led me to want to research this. There have been days where I've finally made time for something that I know lights me up, like a slow shower or dancing between client sessions or a moment of self-touch just to feel grounded again. And my body starts to feel good, like really good. And I notice this urge to shut down, to move on, to check my phone, to go do something productive. And what I've learned is that it's not just about giving myself pleasure. It's about learning to tolerate it, to stay in it, to trust that it's safe, to feel good for more than just a second. So if you've ever felt like you can't quite hold pleasure, like something inside you gets scared when things feel good, I want you to know that's not a flaw. It's a signal. It's an invitation to expand, to slowly stretch that ceiling, to build a body and a nervous system that can hold joy without guilt, without shame, without apology. And that starts with the tiniest, most intentional moments. So let's talk about what those can look like right now in real life. So now that we've talked about why pleasure matters, let's talk about how to actually bring it into your day. And I don't mean grand, romantic, Instagram perfect rituals. I mean tiny, sustainable, nervous system approved moments that reconnect you to your body. Because pleasure doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't even have to be sexy. It just has to be felt. Start small. Start sensory. Pleasure lives in the senses. Touch, taste, sound, scent, movement. You can create a pleasure ritual in under 5 minutes if you focus on those. Here are a few real practices I try to build into my day. Sometimes in the morning, I'll run my fingers over my collarbone while I breathe. Not with any agenda, not sexual, just to say, hey, body, I'm here. Or I'll add a drop of essential oil into my hands and inhale it before I open my laptop. And it gives me something to feel, something to land in before the digital world floods my brain. Okay, this one is a work in progress, but I try to step away between client sessions, even for 2 minutes. I usually have a 10-minute break. It doesn't really end up being a 10-minute break, but I can sacrifice 2 minutes of my time. Stretch out my arms, shake out energy. Sometimes I literally lie on the floor and hum, yes, like a vibrating human rug. Or I'll light a candle, I'll put on music, touch my skin. Something that reminds me I'm not a robot. I'm not just holding space. I get to feel too. Then in the evenings, to reclaim my end of my day. If I've had one of those days where I've pushed too hard and I've ignored my cues, I try to still give myself something soft. Even if I'm brain fried, I might change into a robe that feels good on my skin, wrap up in a blanket and intentionally breathe. I put one hand on my chest and one hand on my belly and ask myself, what do you want right now? The answer isn't always sexy. Sometimes it's a cookie. Sometimes it's rest. And sometimes, it's touch or fantasy or slow movement that brings me back into my hips. Pleasure isn't something you wait to feel ready for. It's something you rehearse. Even if it's awkward, even if it feels silly at first, even if you only manage 30 seconds of slowness between meetings. Pleasure isn't a reward, it's regulation. It's how you remind yourself in your nervous system, in your body, in your inner fire, that you are still here. You're still worthy. You're still yours. And if that still feels hard to believe, if you feel yourself pulling away from pleasure, even when you're inviting it in, you are so not alone. Let's talk about what gets in the way, because pleasure guilt, that shit is loud, but you don't have to listen to it anymore. So if you've ever paused in the middle of something and thought, do I really deserve this? Or felt guilt creep in just as you started to feel more alive, more relaxed, or more turned on? That's not your intuition. That's conditioning. That's the ghost of every rule book you've never agreed to. That's shame culture showing up like an unwanted guest at your pleasure party. And it's time we stop letting guilt run the show. Because here's the truth. You are allowed to feel good. You are allowed to enjoy your body, your space, your time, your breath, without permission, without performance, and without earning it first. You're allowed to feel good just because you're alive. You don't need to prove anything to anyone to access pleasure. So this week, I want to leave you with a simple practice. Pick one moment every day where you choose pleasure over productivity, even if it's small, even if it feels edgy, even if it's messy. Let it be yours, let it be sacred, and let it be unapologetic. If this video resonated and you want more permission slips, more tools, and more support in reclaiming pleasure on your own terms, you are so invited to join us at the Ember Society. That's my private community where we explore weekly pleasure themes, guided rituals, sensory challenges, and some very spicy Q&A. And if you're not ready for that, but you want to keep this conversation going, hit follow and subscribe to the Untamed Ember podcast and this channel. A new episode will drop weekly, sometimes two in the podcast. And they go really deep into nuance and unlearning and the real talk around sexuality, shame, and radical self-trust. You deserve to feel good. Not someday, not after, but right now. Thanks for being here, love. I'll see you in the next one.